loving tree, and it is one of the main crops grown in the Dominican Republic. Here, it is always grown in agroforestry systems, which is agriculture with trees, and it is never a monocrop. It is almost always grown organically. In fact, the DR has been the main exporter of organic cacao in the world and has been recognized for years for its high quality cacao. But unfortunately, organic has simply not been enough. 80% of cacao farmers are smallholders living in poverty. Their systems are very old, have very low yields, are poorly diversified, and poorly managed. They are not economically nor truly ecologically viable. With climate change impact, this reality is getting worse and worse. This is where regenerative agroforestry can step in. For Inaru, it means using ecological succession as our guide to create truly diversified, dynamic, and resilient perennial agricultural systems that provide all the ecosystemic benefits needed for soil and water regeneration, as well as biodiversity enhancement. This is why we are working to design and implement model plots in different parts of the country to help us measure the true economic and ecological viability of these systems in order to later on empower farmers and expand this transition throughout our supply chain. We are also working to increase awareness on the need to create and expand these systems, including publicly available information and the demand for true incentives for the regenerative transition.
Notice the neat transition. I'm not a tech person, but I'm just so pleased that I got that one worked out. Sorry. So you didn't have to see my message on the page. You know what I mean. So, first of all, I'd like to just set a little context. Why are we at Columbia University? It's a story that began 4 years ago. Wearing my Smallholder Farmers Alliance hat, we were approached by Columbia asking us if we needed some bright graduate students to help with anything that we had. And when it was explained that the graduate students would not get their degree if they didn't give us a good service, it's free, and they're going to do it. And so we challenged the students in the first year to help us figure out, working with smallholder farmers in Haiti, how could we track the impact of crops, in particular cotton, which we were just starting to grow. And over the course of 3 years, we were actually able to develop a beta model of an app that could track the impact of smallholder farming. And out of that emerged the Smallholder Data Services Company, because the enterprise got way too big to accommodate within the framework of a smallholder, of a nonprofit. And so we created Smallholder Data Services, and SFA, as we call it, Smallholder Farmers Alliance, is a major shareholder and financial beneficiary of the new for-profit company. So it's a nice success story of what can be nurtured within a creative university environment. Now, the headline is, where is regenerative agriculture headed? Before we delve into the specifics of that, I would like to ask your assistance to do a little visualization. Now, no woo-woo involved in this, but it would just be helpful if you didn't mind closing your eyes. Or if you don't, but just get your mind ready to go someplace else. You're in the middle of a farmer's field. You look out, it might be grain or something else, but it's all the same plant, as far as you can see to the edge of the horizon. That's a giant monoculture crop, and it needs hybrid seeds in order to work. It needs chemicals and pesticides in order to grow and be managed. It needs very large machinery to be able to function. This is what we call extractive agriculture, because the depletion of the soil and the contribution to climate change is significant. And yes, it feeds a lot of people, but at what cost? So now, continuing with the visualization, now you're in a field on an organic farm. It's no longer a giant monoculture from horizon to horizon. There's other crops being grown, you see shrubs and trees. You sense the presence of insects, maybe some birds. There's no chemicals that have been used on this land. There's no pesticides, no GMOs. And this represents the current gold standard for agricultural sustainability. It's organic, but it's neutral. It doesn't do harm, but it doesn't actually result in a positive good. So now, the last visualization, you're on a farm, but it's not quite a farm. There's a lot going on. You're actually standing in the middle of a community of living things. Plants, shrubs, trees, animals, insects, farm families, communities, and they're all part of a dynamic and holistic ecosystem. It's producing healthy food, but at the same time with social and environmental benefits. And rather than being neutral, it's a net positive. We grow and produce food and fiber and other farm products, but it leaves behind a positive impact. So actually, an increase in soil health, an increase in biodiversity, enhanced water cycles, you're sequestering carbon, and you're actually making a positive contribution to mitigating climate change in the process of growing food. You can open your eyes because you've just experienced regenerative agriculture. And that is the focus of what we wanted to share with you today and get you to learn more about through the distinguished panel that I'm going to ask to come up to the stage now. So these are some of the key figures in what we're calling the quiet revolution. Because not everybody's heard about regenerative agriculture, but trust me, it is a growing global movement. And we're really pleased to have not only some of the smallholder farmers who are doing this at the field level, but then other people involved at different levels, corporations, foundations, and they're going to help give us a more complete picture of what we're talking about. And I wanted to ask that you hold your applause till the very end, so that we can just have a more natural conversation. And I will invite you to take part, but not now. But I would say, as I'm asking these questions, think back to the image of the regenerative agricultural experience in your mind, and how would you answer the question or want to know more from the panelists in that regard? So I'm going to let each panelist introduce themselves, but I'll explain that Michael is here with his partner in life and work. And her name is Chongchaya Chandrawin, and I know that I've just massacred them, but Yoke has kindly explained that her nickname is Yoke, which rhymes with Coke. So I'm going to go with that if you don't mind. And Michael, who would qualify as a panelist in his own way, because of his experience, and has kindly agreed to help translate if Yoke needs it. So I'm going to start, and my question to each of the panelists in order, and after that we'll break it up, so don't worry, we're not going to do that sequential thing, is who are you? What are you doing in regenerative agriculture right now? And what is your goal for regenerative agriculture in its broadest terms?
สวัสดีค่ะ My name is Chongchaya Chandrawin. I am a farmer in Thailand. I practice วรรณเกษตร วรรณเกษตร is agricultural system. Yeah. I learn from and imitate the forest. We plant many species together and learn to use them for all we need in life. Thank you for welcoming here. Yeah.
And I'm going to come back to you and ask a very specific question at the end if you have time. Melissa.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Melissa Pinford. I'm a senior partner at Marine Institute. And we work on a number of food and agriculture initiatives, many of which are starting to really look seriously at the potential of regenerative food systems. So we can dig into that a little bit more later.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. My name is Luke Smith. I represent Terragenesis, and our work is really to develop regenerative supply systems. So we work with brands and farmers and a variety of other stakeholders within the supply system, really to unlock this huge potential that is this approach to farming that, as Hugh walked us through earlier on, has this ability to serve the evolutionary capacity of living systems and communities. So we provide technical assistance and education. We help farmers to connect with premium markets. We help them with monitoring and evaluation. We help them to differentiate their products by the outcomes that are being achieved on the farms themselves. Pleasure to be here.
Melissa. Oh, sorry, Jeannie.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I am Jeannie Renee Malone. I head global sustainability at VF Corporation. So we are the parent company to a number of outdoor activewear brands such as Vans, I'm trying to get a little visual here, Smart Wool, Timberland, we'll hear from my colleague here in a moment, the North Face, and several other brands. And we are deeply committed to environmental stewardship because of the nature of our brands. We know it's important to protect the environment and also the communities and the people within those communities. And so as part of our sustainability journey, we set ambitious science-based targets back in 2019. So those really entail setting a target for our scope 1 and 2 emissions of a 55% reduction by 2030 from a 2017 baseline. And then importantly, our scope 3 target is a 30% reduction also by 2030 from a 2017 baseline. Now, what does that mean? What are we going to do to really reduce those emissions? And so we wanted to understand what really entails our impacts across our entire business. So we took the time to collect data across our entire value chain and found that really 70% of our impact comes from raw material extraction, processing, and production. So it's the raw materials and the factory operations that all go into making our products. And so with that, we know that that's our opportunity. And so we have set a vision that our top 9 materials shall originate from regenerative, responsibly sourced, renewable, or recycled sources by 2030. That's really our pathway to get to our target, is through sustainable materials substitution. And our top 9 materials are, probably no surprise, cotton, polyester, rubber, wool, and a few others. And so that's why we're here today. We are partnering with all these amazing partners here on the stage today. It's really wonderful to have everyone together in person and have this shared vision. Hugh set the stage so nicely earlier with that visual. And what we're trying to do is really put more carbon, store carbon in the ground than emitting to the atmosphere. So that's our purpose, and we're really excited to be on this regenerative journey to not only see how we can collaborate with partners around the globe, but also truly understand the benefits of regenerative and eventually source those materials and put them into our products and translate those benefits to our consumers. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Atlanta McElraith. I am the Director of Social Impact and Activation for Timberland, a VF-owned brand. So Timberland, for those of you who don't know, is we make boots, shoes, clothes, and gear designed with an outdoor lifestyle in mind. I am in fact wearing Timberlands, less for the outdoors, this particular pair, but anyway, it's a past season. But yes, just because Jeannie showed off her Vans, I felt I needed to clarify those are in fact Timberland shoes. So we have a brand purpose, which is we inspire and equip adventurous doers, that's our target consumer, to step outside, work hard together, and move the world forward. And one of the ways in which we move the world forward is through our corporate social responsibility strategy, which for many years now, we did our first CSR report, I think in 2001. But our strategy really hinges on three things: better product, greener world, and stronger communities. And better product really is all about not only the materials that go into our product, but how they're made in fair, safe, and non-discriminatory factories. Greener world, we do a lot of tree planting and urban greening work, and stronger communities, we do a lot of community service and investments in communities that are important to our brand. But one of the things about regenerative agriculture, which we're so excited about, is that it really hits on all three. Not only are we talking about incorporating regeneratively sourced materials in our products, but as Jeannie expressed, and as you'll hear more on the panel, it's a way of protecting our environment, but also the communities that are farming in regenerative ways are served much better than the communities that are serving or involved in industrial agriculture, right? There are a lot of benefits, as you'll hear later from this panel, to the communities as well. So we are making investments in 4 different regenerative materials. The first is leather. That's one of the biggest materials that we use in our products, even though you didn't mention it in your top 9. But I think we're the brand that uses the most leather. So we are investing in regenerative ranching to make sure that the cattle is raised in regenerative ways. We're investing in sugarcane projects. We use sugarcane in midsoles of some of our more athletic wear. We're investing in cotton, in Haitian-grown cotton with the Smallholder Farmers Alliance. And the last one is, what is the last one? Rubber, of course, rubber. I'm so sorry, rubber as well. So those are the 4 key materials that we're focused on and making investments right now in projects like the Oaks project in Thailand that is producing regenerative rubber for us.
Thank you. Timothy.
Good morning, everyone.
So I just want to ask, can everybody hear? Is it all right? Okay.
Good morning. Pleasure to be here this morning. My name is Timothy George, and I'm the co-founder of the Smallholder Farmers Alliance in Haiti. We have a set of human activities that cause harm to the planet. And one of them is intensive farming. Intensive farming contributes significantly to release greenhouse gas. And because of these practices, about 24 billion tons of topsoil get eroded every year. That's the area the size of Greece. And on the opposite side, we have this reality. If we were able to store 0.4% more carbon in the world soil, that will be enough. So if we do that every year, that will be enough to offset all human CO2 emissions. So regenerative agriculture happens to be helpful in that way. We can use it to do a lot of things, among them storing more carbon in the soil. So this agriculture puts together 3 different worlds: the world of soil, the vegetable world, and the animal world. So all three of them in a symbiotic relationship. And that's why in Haiti, we try right now to initiate these practices in our project. So the cotton project, we used to do organic cotton, now extending to regenerative cotton. At the stage we are now, you cannot apply all the regenerative agriculture practices at once. We divide them into phases. Now we are at phase one, where we're doing training and trying to establish demo sites, and also showing farmers and teaching them how to prepare the soil without mechanized tillage, and not using any synthetics, using mulching, and trying to do rotation, cropping with different crops that have beneficial relationship. And also we trying to use techniques like vermicomposting in our operation. So that's part of phase one, and we also
Timothy, can you just describe vermiculture?
yeah. So the vermiculture is the fact that we produce worms. So the worms will be like life in the soil. They will biodegrade everything very rapidly, and actually that will continue to restore in your soil. We are planting perennial trees around the cotton farms, so that we can have more biomass on site. So it's like if you were looking for another name for regenerative agriculture, you could say circular agriculture, because it really, as nature works in circularity, so there's regenerative agriculture. So you produce responsibly, you biodegrade. That's how you feed the soil itself, and you end up to have more yield and better yield. So production, biodegradation on site, and more yield. And it's for permanent life. And the good thing, again, with it is as you keep practicing regenerative agriculture, you will see your yield is going up and your input cost decreasing. So that's a good thing to do and to enjoy all of us.
You can understand why thousands of smallholder farmers in Haiti look up to you. Sarah.
Beautiful, beautiful words from Timothy and all of the fabulous panelists here. My name is Sarah Farley. I lead the global portfolio of the food team at the Rockefeller Foundation. And we are just getting into regenerative food systems. We've been at the work of promoting agriculture and production systems for over 100 years as a funder of the Green Revolution, as a funder of the formation of the CG. And with that history, we've learned some lessons about what it means when we focus so myopically on production at the cost of environmental consequences, sociocultural consequences. And so really it's out of recognition that our current food system is failing if we judge it against the need to have nourishment, the need to have equity and justice, the need to not just find balance, but restore and replenish our food systems. We need to optimize for a very different type of food system than we have today. And so out of that recognition, the Rockefeller Foundation is really turning a new corner and joining many of these crusaders who've been at this longer than we have. And what that means, our new strategy is really focused on good food. We want to enable access and affordability of good food for everyone. And we're defining good, that simple little one-syllable word, as is only good when it is nourishing, when it is equitable, and when it is regenerative. There's a lot of work in front of us, and delighted to be on this panel to unpack really what that means, because as you'll see momentarily, it does not mean the same thing to everyone. But I will say for Rockefeller, we're looking to see the deepest connotation of regenerative. Regenerative that does what Timotei just spoke to. It's healing the planet, it's good for animals, it's good for the earth, but it's also importantly connected to cultural, spiritual tradition, ownership of land, these things that we've dismissed, frankly, for many, many decades. So lots to learn, lots to share.
Well, then, picking up on your last comment, I wondered if I could ask Yoke to share your experience of how you are able to integrate the local cultural traditions, the kind of spiritual underpinnings of your work in Thailand. How does that fit in with the regenerative approach?
ก็ที่มันจะเชื่อมก็คือตอนแรกที่เราก็ทำเกษตรอย่างเงี้ยมันไม่มีอะไรเลยมันดูจน
Okay, when I started farming, I felt like I was poor. There was nothing there.
แล้วก็คือพ่อแม่ก็พยายามที่จะส่งเรียนมหาลัยเพื่อที่จะเหมือนกับพัฒนาอะไรที่มันดีขึ้น
So my parents, they sent me to university so I could have maybe a better life and earn more income.
แต่เราไม่เห็นอะไรในมหาลัยที่มันดีขึ้นจริง
But going to university, I didn't see anything that was really better.
ๆคือถ้าเปรียบเทียบกันเราก็เห็นว่าในมหาลัยมันไม่ได้มีอาหารที่มันดีสำหรับเรา
In the university, there wasn't food that was really good for me. It wasn't the same healthy food from home.
เราก็เรียนอะไรก็เหมือนตามคำสั่งครูตลอด
And what I had to learn was following what the teacher told me to learn all the time.
เราก็เลยรู้สึกว่าเราอยากกลับบ้าน
So I felt I wanted to go home.
แล้วก็ทำในเรื่องที่รู้สึกว่ามันมีความสุขแต่ว่าเราดูจนแล้วก็ดูแค่ไม่มีเงินแต่เราสิ่งที่เรามีก็คือเหมือนเรามีแบบเรามีเพื่อนเรามีควายเรามีอาหารแต่เราแค่จน
So I wanted to go home, and maybe I appeared poor, but then I had friends in the buffalo, in the plants, in the life there. Maybe I didn't have money.
คือเด็กๆเนี้ยเราจะช่วยแม่เราทำหลังคาก็คือพายหญ้าจากหญ้าคา
When I was a child, I helped to make roofing from the wild grasses there, like with my mother.
แล้วก็เราไปขุดมันนก
And I would collect wild yams,
แล้วก็หาหน่อไม้
and I would get bamboo shoots.
แล้วก็ชาวบ้านจะทำนาแค่ปีละครั้ง
And we only planted rice once a year.
ควาย50 ตัวของเราสามารถที่จะไปที่ไหนก็ได้
The 50 buffalo we had could go wherever they wanted. There were lots of places for them to graze.
เราก็เลยได้เที่ยวไปของควาย
So I would get to travel around with the buffalo.
เราไม่มีครูสอนว่ายน้ำเราเรียนว่ายน้ำของควาย
I didn't have a swimming teacher. The buffalo taught me how to swim.
เราก็เลยรู้สึกว่าแบบโอเคฉันก็มีความสุขดีแต่ว่ามันเหมือนกับพ่อแม่ก็รู้สึกว่าเหมือนเรื่องเงินก็ทำให้เราว่าส่งเราเพื่อที่จะเหมือนมีชีวิตที่ดีขึ้นจะได้แบบมันอาจจะมีการถูกกดขี่จากเรื่องกฎหมายบ้างอะไรอย่างเงี้ยค่ะ
So I felt happy there, but my parents said that I should have a better life, and maybe it's the changing in the laws and what we can do. So it different path.
แล้วก็หลังจากที่เราเรียนจบมหาลัยเรารู้สึกว่าหลังจากที่เราได้กลับบ้านเรากลับบ้านไม่ได้เราเป็นเหมือนแบบคนบ้าคนหนึ่งที่ถูกส่งไปแล้วก็ใช้เงินจากพ่อแม่เยอะมากเพราะว่าเหมือนพ่อแม่เป็นเกษตรกรที่ยากจนแต่ว่าเหมือนกู้ยืมเงินบ้านที่จะส่งให้เราเรียนมหาลัยอะไรเงี้ย
And when I decided to go home, it wasn't supported. Everyone saw me as a crazy person. Why are you doing this? And then they had already invested money for my studies, and so why was I going home like this?
แล้วก็เราอยากกลับบ้านแต่เราโชคดีที่มีบ้านเพื่อนครูสอนว่าถ้าเกิดเราก็อยากจะไม่แบ่งทำงานบริษัทราชการหรืออะไรก็แล้วแต่เราจะต้องทำเรื่องชีวิตของเราถึงจะอยู่ได้ถ้าไม่เราไม่
But I was lucky because there was a teacher of a regenerative agriculture system we call Wanaka State, and he said we have to go back and then we learn to take care of our lives from what we have.
มีอย่างเดียวเท่านั้นที่เราจะตอบสนองชีวิตเราได้คือทำเรื่องป่า
So the only thing that fit my life was to grow a forest.
แล้วผู้ใหญ่ก็บอกว่าถ้าเกิดคุณไม่อยากรวยก็ต้องปลูกป่าแต่ตอนนั้นเราไม่เข้าใจ
And the teacher Puya even says if you want to be wealthy, you need to grow a forest. But I didn't understand why.
เพราะว่ามันแตกต่างจากคนอื่นที่คนอื่นก็ปลูกมันปลูกอ้อยปลูกข้าวปลูกอะไรแต่ว่าเขาทำเพื่อเงินแต่เขาไม่มีเงินแต่เราทำเรื่องป่ามันจะได้ยังไง
So this is very different because all the thing farmers they say that you need to grow corn, you need to grow sugarcane, you need to grow cassava, but this is what they do. But those farmers they're always poor. They don't have anything. So how can I be wealthy by growing a forest?
เราก็เลยกลายเป็นเหมือนกับคนที่เหมือนไม่ค่อยมีใครคุยด้วยเป็นคนบ้ามากอะไรอย่างเงี้ย
So not many people wanted to talk to me. I was seen as crazy within my village and my context.
แล้วก็เราก็เหมือนกับร้องไห้ไปเยอะมาก
And I cried a lot.
แต่ว่าตอนนี้เรารู้สึกว่าก็20 ปี10ถ้าจากการที่เราเริ่มปลูกป่าก็15 ปีแล้ว
And it's now been 15 years since I started to grow a forest.
แต่ก็เริ่มต้นจากการที่เราก็ทำเรื่องของตัวเองทั้งหมดเลยที่พี่เอกบอก
So I followed the teachings to try to do everything that I need for my own life as my teacher Buddha even taught.
ตื่นเช้ามาคุณต้องกินตื่นเช้ามาคุณต้องทำอะไรก็ล้างหน้าแปรงฟันสระผมคุณก็ต้องหาสิ่งเหล่านี้จากต้นไม้
So what do when you wake up? You need to wash your face, you need to wash your hair, you need to brush your teeth. So let's find this from the trees in the system. How do we wash our hair? How do we wash our face?
ก็คือเอาทุกสิ่งทุกอย่างที่ตอบสนองแล้วก็ใช้สิ่งที่มันมีอยู่ในท้องถิ่น
So we use everything in our environment and the local resources to meet that what we need for our life.
ซึ่งจริงๆเราก็ยังช่วยแม่ทำงานอยู่เหมือนเดิม
And I still help my mother growing rice
ทำนาปลูกมันสำปะหลัง
and growing cassava
แล้วก็ขายอาหารเล็กน้อย
and selling a little bit of food.
แต่เราก็ยังทำเรื่องของเราด้วย
But I also did my things for
แต่
myself,
เรา
for my own
ไม่ได้
needs.
เงินเลย
But I didn't get any money at that time.
ก็เริ่มต้นที่ค่อนข้างจะยากลำบากเพราะว่ามันไม่ได้มีกระแสที่ทุกคนแบบกำลังเป็นอยู่จากตอนนั้นคือแบบทุกคนไปทำงานแล้วได้เงินเยอะมาก
It was very difficult first because everyone saw like I'm not making money and other people are making money who come out of the university.
ก็เลยทำให้เรารู้สึกว่ามันมีกำลังใจจากบ้านผู้ใหญ่บูนแต่เราก็ไม่รู้ว่าเราจะได้อะไรจากสิ่งที่เราทำแต่เรารู้ว่าในแต่ละวันที่เราอยู่รอด
So I had some inspiration from my teacher, but I was able to meet my needs for everyone at least. I didn't know where to
พร้อม
go.
กับแม่ที่ยังคงมีหนี้สินอยู่ แม่
Even
ยังมีหนี้สิน
even my mother still had some debts from the university and other costs.
แล้วการที่เราเรียนจบมหาลัยที่ค่อนข้างจะมีชื่อเสียงก็คือมหาลัยลาดกระบังแล้วก็เรามีสิทธิ์ที่จะไปเป็นแบบพนักงานที่มันยิ่งใหญ่ได้หมายถึงว่าทำงานที่ดีๆหรือเป็นหรืออะไร
So because I got a degree from a fairly famous university, I could get a fairly good job.
Sort of like Colombia.
แล้วเราก็ถามอย่างโดยเฉพาะที่มีธนาคารเราก็ถามว่าเนี่ยตอนเนี้ยเมื่อก่อนนี้มันแบบยากที่จะเดินทางไปในชนบทแล้วก็วันหนึ่งที่เขาก็ถามว่าเราก็ไปทำงานกับเขาไหมเพราะว่าตอนนี้คือธนาคารเขารับผู้หญิงแล้วนะเราก็ถามเราก็ตอบว่าแล้วคุณมีความสุขไหมแต่ฉันไม่มีเงินเลยฉันก็มีความสุขดี
So she was offered jobs, but from the bank said, "Oh, you're going to spend more than this business." No, I'm happy with what I'm doing now. I'm happy. I don't need to take another job.
แล้วก็ถ้าตอนนี้เรารู้สึกว่าโอเคหลังจากที่เราทำมาทั้งหมดมันมีความชัดว่าเราอยู่ได้แล้วเราก็มีเงินด้วย
But now after a while, I'm clear. It's not only just meeting it, but also can have a very good earning from this as well.
จากการที่เราเพราะว่ามันมาหลายปีแล้วเราก็เหมือนจะมีแบบถ้าเราพูดหัดเรียนไทยก็จะง่ายก็คืออย่างผู้ใหญ่พี่บุญบอกว่าถ้าเราก็จะต้องอาบน้ำเราก็จะทำอะไรอันนี้ก็คือเราเห็นความอิสระจากการที่เรารู้ว่าเราจะต้องอาบน้ำแล้วก็วันไหนต้นไม้อะไรก็มันสบู่
So and now, like I said, what we have to do, we have to wash ourselves, and we need soap. So now I know how to make soap from the coconuts that I grow to make them into oil, to make them into soap.
ใช่เราเห็นความอิสระเพราะว่าหลังจากที่เราเห็นต้นมะพร้าวเราจะไม่ได้เห็นแค่มะพร้าวเราเห็นคือต้นตระกูลของเรา
So now I see a coconut tree not only as a coconut tree but as a soap tree.
แล้วก็เรารู้สึกว่าก็มันเรารู้ว่าสบู่ทั่วไปมันจะมีเขาจะใส่แบบนมแพะนมวัวนี่คือแบบที่ปกติ
And then there's some special soaps they'll put in cow's milk or goat milk soap,
แต่เราทำสบู่บนควาย
but I use buffalo milk soap.
มันมีแต่คนแบบนี้เพราะว่าเขาแบบรู้สึกควายโง่แล้วก็มันไม่มีใครทำสบู่บนควายมาก่อน
But it's not a normal thing, and people think, oh, that's unusual.
And you're also then growing rubber or harvesting rubber.
ก็เราก็ปลูกยางพาราเหมือนกันไหม
ไม่ได้ปลูกยางพาราเพราะว่าเหมือนกับพื้นที่ของเราไม่ได้มียางพารา
We don't grow rubber ourselves directly, but we don't have in our areas not rubber, but working in it's the same knowledge system. the
แต่
rubber.
ว่าสิ่งที่มันตอบสนองก็คือว่าตอนนี้เรามีผลิตภัณฑ์เยอะมากที่จะทำให้เรื่องของตัวเองอย่างเช่นอันนี้ที่จะตอบสนองอาบน้ำอย่างที่พี่เอกพูดบอกก็ตอนนี้มันมีความชัดว่าผลิตภัณฑ์ทั้งหมดที่เราทำที่อยู่ด้านหลังถ้าเกิดคุณอยากจะดูมันทำให้ผลิตภัณฑ์เหล่านี้ที่เราทำเพื่อตอบสนองเนี่ยมันเป็นเรื่องของชีวิตแต่ว่าพอเรามีรายได้จากการที่เราแบบเหมือนผลิตภัณฑ์เนี่ยตอบสนองตัวเองแล้วก็การขายคอร์สก็ขายคอร์สแล้วก็เข้าท่องเที่ยวก็เที่ยวทั่วปี
So now, as you can see, the products are also displayed there. So there's many different things that can meet our needs in terms of daily life, in terms of medicine. So this provides a livelihood, it provides for this, but also the knowledge systems that we revitalized. Now she also can sell the knowledge and courses, and it's even given the amazing opportunity to join in this today as well.
Thank you very much. Given how diverse the local application is of regenerative agriculture from Thailand to Haiti, Luke, I wanted to ask you, if it's so diverse in the way it's implemented in each location, how do you know it's regenerative? Who decides if it's regenerative? Although that is, how do you measure it? Of course, that's a loaded question because Solar Data Services helps to measure it. Sorry. Don't forget that.
It's an important question. So there's some questions that we need to ask first and foremost. In any given context, what is regenerating and what needs to be regenerated? So we consider regeneration to be both a paradigm, i.e. it's a way of thinking, like Lucas just shared with us. It's a way of thinking about the role of humans, the role of agriculture, the role of communities. It's also a process. It's a process that's inherent to all living beings on planet Earth. So what might be true for the Wanakase farmers in Thailand or for the cotton farmers in Haiti, or for me at my homestead in the Finger Lakes, may be very different because it's a different ecological context, it's a different sociocultural context. And so we always start with what are the objectives of the farmer? What is it that they're seeking to regenerate in their context? And then how would we know that they're moving towards those objectives? So we can identify there are specific outcomes that they really care about. Maybe it's, as Jörg was saying, these traditional understandings and knowledge systems. Maybe it's the biodiversity, the different crops that they have on the farm, or the birds, the insects, native flora. Maybe it's the health of the watershed, or how resilient their farm is to drought or flooding or other adverse weather conditions. And so we start there working with the farmers to really understand what are the outcomes that they're seeking, and then how can we measure those outcomes? How can the farmers measure those outcomes? Because farmers are empirical. They're learning. They plant something, they see whether it works, and they determine, well, why did it work or why didn't it work? And then they adapt, they change. Okay, maybe I need to grow in these other soil conditions, or maybe it needs more water or less water. And so really what we want to do is to help farmers to be better able to learn for their own purposes, but also for a larger community, so they can share those learnings, because seeing is believing. You know, it's one thing to say, this is a good thing, you should do it. And it's another thing, seeing it for yourself and being able to try it yourself. Farmers always looking over the fence line and seeing what the neighbors are doing and seeing, well, what are you doing differently, and how is that benefiting you? So we've developed an approach, and I'm very happy to say there's a wonderful sort of sea change happening now that is looking at more outcome-based verification approaches to understanding change in farm landscapes, as opposed to the more sort of compliance-based approaches that we've used thus far. And in any given context, we can identify what is regenerating there and what's important for the farmers, and then we can magnetize that for the kinds of stakeholders, the buyers and other investors and other stakeholders who want to be part of that. Those are things that they care about as well, and they want to align themselves with that movement and what's happening there. And so with the Wanakesade farmers in Thailand, we were very fortunate to find in Timberland initially, but then also Vans and North Face, partners who really cared about those outcomes that were being achieved and that we wanted to see collectively. We wanted to see at a larger scale. So I think to loop back around the paradigm, it's a way of thinking. We have to approach things. We have to think about what we're doing in a different way. There's this wonderful quote from Einstein that I really like, which is around, we can't solve our problems using the same level of thinking that created them. And that for me means we have to learn to see with new eyes. We need to be able to think in new ways such that we can show up in the world in new ways. And I think much of what I'm really excited about and inspired about in the regenerative agriculture and supply movement that's really blossoming now is that stakeholders are coming together and working in new ways that perhaps they wouldn't have done before. They're not thinking purely in competitive terms. They're thinking, how can we work together? How can we affect change at greater scales by working together? How can we form new kinds of partnerships? And it all starts with that new way of thinking and committing to the outcomes that are in the best interest of everyone.
Picking up on that, and I know that Jeannie is going to have to leave a little bit early, but I just wanted to ask both of you in Atlanta, why are you doing this? I mean, because, and seriously, because regenerative is not yet in the public domain. I talk to my friends, I say, involved in regenerative agriculture, it's like a big blank. They can relate to organic, but regenerative, not out there in the public domain. So what led you to be able to be ready to embrace, invest, and support regenerative agriculture?
Sure. I'll start off and pass it over to Atlanta. So why are we doing regenerative? And I mentioned earlier that we have set targets that we are working toward through material substitution. And so our
But excuse me, why? And I don't agree. But why are you doing that? Is that an internal policy? Have you anticipated public demand, responding to regulatory environments?
I see right from this question. Yes. So it's a combination. I think corporations now there's an expectation that companies give back, and so it's our responsibility to do more than just be a for-profit company. There's an expectations from our investment community, from our consumers, from other stakeholders, and there's also regulatory pressure now. You may have been following that the SEC has a proposed rule about including progress toward goals in our financial reporting. And so we know, back to the commentary that Luke gave around data, it is so important for us to have the appropriate data to track progress toward our goals. Now, why regenerative? We want to be authentic in our approach. We have, in our business purpose statement, is focused on betterment of people and the planet. Regenerative is the perfect way to go about that, to really think about the people, the farmers. So proud to be up here on stage with everyone working in this area and to really hear directly from Yoke and from Timothée about what it's like, what it means to transform, and the deep connection to the earth through the process. I mean, for us, that's what this is about. It's not only, yes, we have a science-based target, we have to track progress, but we want to do this in a way that is truly creating positive benefits, whether it's renewable energy, material substitution or eliminating plastic waste out of our business. It's really looking at those ancillary benefits of to people as we're addressing the environment.
And I know you're going to a lunch meeting where you'll be sitting down with other heads of sustainability for Google, Amazon, etc. How are you finding other companies are responding to the lead that you've taken? Because VF is out there way in front in terms of footwear and clothing. Has that caused you problems, brought you benefits you didn't anticipate?
It's, we're very proud to lead in this area, and we are seeing a number of other brands. Sorry, wait, just 1 second.
Street reality.
We're seeing a number of other brands really ramping up their regenerative efforts. And I think that's exciting. I mean, really, to achieve the goals collectively, this 1.5 degree pathway, it's going to need all of us working in the space. And we were talking about this earlier, that the partnerships, the collaboration, the investments, just really the raising awareness and the education around regenerative is incredibly important for us to protect the planet. And so, yes, we love to be a leader in this area, of course, but we're starting to partner with other industries, with the food industry. There's a great, opportunity, you mentioned this earlier, Luke, around, just how these partnerships can really scale what we're trying to do in a bigger way. So again, yes, we love being a leader in this area, but at the same time, it really requires all of us to collaboratively to really get this to scale.
So I wanted to follow up with a question to both Melissa and Sarah. So there's a plane, and it is completely environmentally neutral. It's all solar. In fact, it contributes positively to climate change in the course of going around the world. And you're taking 10 Columbia graduate students to show them where is the cutting edge of regenerative agriculture. And Thailand and Haiti don't count. Where would you take them to show them what it looks like on the ground, so the cutting edge of regenerative agriculture?
I like that question, and I think it's something we haven't quite named yet on the panel, which is in some ways regenerative is as cutting edge as is indigenous wisdom. A lot of what we're talking about here isn't new at all. If you zoom out, prior to the industrialization, the creation of monoculture, and really the kind of system you had us first visualized this morning in that lovely exercise cue, those systems, if anything, have been struggling to remain intact and have been supplanted, right? So if we want to go back and see it, we can go to places where, frankly, one of the most deadly professions one can choose today is to be an eco-activist of indigenous descent.
Mm-hmm.
Living in Amazonia, trying to protect forests, trying to maintain the original paradigm of agroforestry, right? So if you want to see it, we need to go to these areas under threat. We need to connect to cultures and traditions that we have really been separate from, divorced from. And I think in that, something I also want to name, since we jumped a little bit over the question of definition of regenerative, many of the definitions, if we look at NRDC as one example, really name practices by indigenous peoples as a core construct in the naming of what is regenerative. And I think, therefore, this term has become fraught because there's a hurt, there's a lack of trust, and there's a sense that those ways have been dismissed and supplanted. And now that it's not working, we're saying, and by the way, that looked pretty good. Let's call it regenerative, right? And so I think there's a lot of healing that has to be done, a lot of listening and learning. And therefore, I want to kind of take that question of where would you go and connect it to what I would offer as a way, and this really builds off what you were offering as well, with the kind of farmer centricity and using an outcomes framework to define something that really varies by food system, by bioscape, by not just ecological tradition, but indigenous traditional wisdom. And that is to say, I think we can almost view regenerative as a spectrum that differs from shallow regenerative to deep regenerative. And one of the concerns I have is we're seeing companies jump on the bandwagon, we're getting a little more of the shallow, which is optimizing food systems for carbon. And that is good. We have a massive carbon problem. We shouldn't impede those efforts. But these other layers that many of you are speaking to, connecting back to cultural tradition, recognizing who owns the land, are we talking about that? Is this not just profitability, but your story, Doak, of it was how you were connected to your cultural tradition, to a sense of wisdom, to a sense of all of the multiple dimensions of food systems. If that's what we're optimizing for, if that's what farmers are seeking, that is so multidimensional and frankly, really hard to quantify and measure. And so I just want to say that I think for Rockefeller's sake, we would like to be here in this space to understand that spectrum and really give a premium and a voice to those fighting for deep regenerative, which would overcome, I think, some of the distrust, which is in the space.
Melissa, you have a unique perspective from the Regen 10 point of view. How are you seeing these issues unfolding, and where do you see the impetus for creating that deeper sense of regenerative and not letting it get hijacked in one sense?
Yeah, thanks. I think, as we've heard already from Yoke, is that a lot of the images is coming from farmers themselves. I think the challenges that farmers are facing on a daily basis with the land, with soil degradation, soil health, water pollution, climate impacts, and others. I mean, this is an existential threat for them. And farmers are doing what they've always done, which is, as Luke said, they're adapting, they're learning, they're introducing, sometimes going back to old techniques or introducing new innovative techniques. This takes time, money, and know-how, right? This isn't easy to move from, what is currently sort of like a high input, high yield form of agriculture to regenerative. And so to your earlier question of like, what's the one place you would go? I think it's too hard to sort of say this is the one place because it's so local context specific. I know from talking to farmers organizations all over the world, there are examples all over the world where farmers are really trying to do this and move along this spectrum and increasingly, and it takes time and they're taking risks as well when they're doing this. And we have to really understand, I think, deeply that perspective. Like, why are we putting all the risk and so little of the reward into the farmers' pockets? So we need to look at some of the broader kind of enabling conditions, some of the drivers of the current system, the current power asymmetry as well in food value chains, and really address why is it that we have a system right now that is geared towards producing cheap, plentiful food, which is essentially creating so many sort of huge impacts for climate, environment, and it's not leading to these sorts of healthy, nutritious, sustainable food systems. We're in a mess, basically.
Yes.
And so I think the impetus is coming from farmers. The impetus is also coming, as we've heard, from business. A lot of progressive business now is very interested in regenerative food systems. They see that this makes business sense for them. They need to invest in the resilience of their suppliers and into the landscapes where they're procuring from. And they want to do the right thing. Many are really feeling the need to show leadership right now when we're facing a climate and nature crisis. We're also facing a cost of living crisis. We've got fertilizer prices and others. So I think also that's also playing into this element. When fertilizer prices is skyrocketing, that also does create an opportunity where farmers are now thinking, okay, like what can I do to kind of reduce those costs as well? We're seeing a lot of interest as well from subnational governments and from national governments. There are many like Colombia, Rwanda, all over the world, Kenya, where there's really exciting stuff happening. COVID also brought that along when food supply chains were disrupted, and really looking at like more circular economy and how can we really boost the relationship between cities and rural areas and food supply. So I think there's clearly a huge interest in regenerative. As we've heard already, there's not a clear universally accepted definition. I think there is, whilst I said that there's interest coming from farmers, there's movement and already a lot of exciting innovations coming from farms and from landscapes. There's also deep skepticism. And, I was at the World Farmers Organization General Assembly a couple of months ago, and, we heard it from them, like a lot of them are interested, a lot of them are deeply skeptical. They think that this could impose a lot more requirements on farmers, and this is going to exclude some current farmers from, with increasing burdens of reporting. They're already being asked to report, against different metrics for their suppliers. So we want to really, through Regen 10, really bring together leading. We want to work deeply with farmers themselves, with other landscape dwellers, indigenous peoples and others, and really try to understand exactly what you mean, the outcomes of different practices, really kind of learn from the ground up what this means in different contexts. And can we, by looking at the principles of regenerative, not definitions, not ideology or dogmatic or based on practices, because it's just too different, but really looking at the key principles, looking at the metrics that make sense at the farm level and the landscape level, and construct a kind of bring everyone together around an aligned regenerative outcomes framework. And can we test that in landscapes? Can we adapt and learn and really try to kind of avoid this being a niche thing, like I would say organic is right now, and it's just for the people who can afford to buy organic, but we need this to be mainstream. So what we're trying to do with Regen 10 is really answer this question. What would it take to really have 50% of the world's food production creating positive benefits for people, for nature, for climate? What would it take? We don't have the answers to that yet, but we really need to urgently focus our attention on the evidence, on the metrics, the data, the financial assistance, the policy enabling environment, and really importantly, build the trust. And that does involve, we've heard it from almost everyone here, it's listening, learning and understanding, and creating that open space in which to really understand where farmers are coming from right now. We can't impose such high standards when farmers are struggling for survival right now. We have to work with them, we have to partner, we have to provide the support, and step by step, and this will take time, and we have to understand what does it take to shift from one sort of current extractive model of food production to a regenerative, and to go with them on the journey and share equally the responsibility for that.
So the eco-friendly jet road trip is off, and instead we're looking towards advancing a paradigm shift. And to that end, it's going to take some marketing. So Atlanta, how are you thinking about sensitizing an audience of potential consumers to want to buy regenerative products? Then I'm going to ask a follow-up to Timothy that's related but local.
So this is an interesting question, Hugh, because we do have two regenerative leather products out now. Starting in spring 23, we'll be introducing products with regenerative rubber. We introduced in the spring of 21 Haitian-grown cotton into our product line. However, it wasn't regenerative, but it will be the next time we do it. And I think it's a bit of a challenge to get marketing to go out boldly with the messaging. So right now, while we are using these materials in our products, we are not telling a bold story about it. And for me, I find that a little frustrating. But what I see is, a tremendous opportunity for us to be telling the story and other brands to be telling the story. Marketing will say, consumers don't know about that, and I think the challenge is, are we going to take responsibility to educate consumers about it, to create more consumer pull for these products? And it's a little bit of a challenge, but I think it's a huge opportunity sitting, resting on the table for us that we're working on it, and I think we'll get there. And my expectation is that when we introduce the products with regenerative rubber, that we will be telling that story, because we will have more of a product line with those products. But previously, the Haitian cotton program, was 3 styles. It wasn't huge. And the regenerative leather products that we have on our website right now, again, it's not sort of a coordinated collection. It's a shoe over here, it's a shoe over here. So I think that also lends itself to the challenge of how does marketing kind of bring these different products together to tell a story. But my expectation is that when the rubber product line hits, it'll be more of a cohesive story to tell that will make it easier to tell that story. But one of the challenges we do have, and we have many conversations in-house, and it kind of goes back to this question of what's the definition. But once you have a definition, how do you make that super simple for a consumer to get in sort of the 5 seconds you have their attention before they swipe in a direction? How do you, tell that story either with a visual or with a very, it's a very complex, as you're hearing, and nuanced agricultural practice, right, that changes for every location. And so how do we condense that into a consumer-facing message? And we're still, that's a nut we have yet to crack, but we're working on it.
I'm going to ask one more question before we open it up to you guys to ask questions. And if I may direct it to Timote. In terms of scaling regenerative agriculture, I mean, Atlanta was talking about the marketing in terms of the product side as one way to help to facilitate the expansion of regenerative. At the community level in Haiti, how do you see the expansion of regenerative agriculture being taken up by smallholder farmers who do not have access to an export market? That they're simply seeing the value and adopting it without any external support even necessarily. Is that a realistic goal in your opinion?
Yes, possible. First thing we need to know is farmers don't get engaged by the concept. They can engage by seeing the results, by seeing how we practice and
Like demonstration plots?
Yes. So we are now establishing demo sites where we can show you the concept. And as we have a place where that is successful, it will be easier to replicate somewhere else. And culturally talking, it's not difficult at all to engage them because they have a way to work together in Haiti, which is conduit. It's like a way for farmers to help each other during their work. And it's in simple word, it will be a work party. So 15, 20 farmers get together to have one. So next day is for another one, and so forth. So we use this channel to realize some of the work, like to establish a demo site. All of them come together and we do that. So by doing it, they understand much better, and they themselves go teaching other farmers about it. So that's difficult at all to replicate.
Mm-hmm.
The main thing is to have something that works in one point, in one region of the country. And then after that, we go for next level.
And if I may give the last word to Yoke, because she came the farthest of anybody today. Yoke, how do you see engaging more smallholder farmers, particularly youth, who might otherwise leave the farm? How do you see regenerative working to bring more of them into agriculture?
visit.
ก็มันต้องเริ่มต้นจากความมั่นใจที่จะต้องให้เขารู้สึกว่าเขามีความมั่นคงในชีวิตก็คือเริ่มต้นจากตัวเราเองมีหลักประกันมีกินมีใช้มีหลักประกันมีเกียรติศักดิ์ศรี
So first thing is they have to be confident. They have to see that this really can meet their needs, that they have their needs for their daily life, and they also have security and reserve. And they have respect as well.
จริงๆเราก็สับเราก็เตรียมเรื่องของเราไปช่วยแบบแต่งให้สวยเพราะว่าตอนนี้เป็นไม่ออก
Okay, we prepared, she wants me to read what we prepared earlier. So when we look at the farmer situation in Thailand today, perhaps most of the world, most farmers spend their effort to produce one commodity crop, which could be rice, cassava, or such. They normally spend a lot on seeds and fertilizers, and then they may sell for only one season, one time per season, but they cannot set the market price as well. So many times they lose money if they make any money at all. At the same time, farmers like all of us, they have costs every day. They have needs every day, every month, every year. But here's something, so we have to be able to meet those needs and expenses every day, every month. So as she explained before, we have to understand how to meet our expenses in this each day, meaning providing for what we eat, we can grow what we can eat, we can provide for this. In this way, we reduce our costs. And we can also start to, when we start to produce for our own needs, we don't just have enough for ourselves, we start to have abundance. We have a banana thing, we can't eat all those bananas, so we can share those bananas, and we can also sell them. When we share them, they come back in different ways. They may come back as fish, they may come back in other ways. So that's the kind of the gift economy, but it also provides income to meet all the local needs, our needs, and with medicine and so forth. And then we shift to regenerative. We don't use fertilizer. We start to have a healthy system, like Timothée explained so well. So the costs go down in this, and the productivity goes up. And then whatever money we do earn is now powerful, because basically we're not spending much. It's just coming to pay that. But at the same time, we also need to shift out of the commodity market. So we need to shift into a market to people who respect and who understand the value that we are producing, which is either to reach the consumer directly, maybe, or like Yolks with their product, or also like we have with the VF project, that there's a respect and there's an understanding of the regenerative nature, which gives a strong market, and gives a support price for realistic livelihood. And then from this, we have a very good quality of life. We get to live on our own land, we get to live with nature, we get to eat food that is real and alive, and we can have income flexibility. We are not poor compared to our friends who might be engineers. So, that's
No shade on the engineering students in technology. Now I think a round of applause for the panelists. And opening it up to questions. You can stand up, name, loud voice, and your question, please.
John Cho, Eco Restoration Alliance. I'm impressed by the wonderful work you're all doing. And I'm impressed by your frustration and struggle about getting the word out. I have a question. The question is, why haven't I heard anything about the fact that regenerative land, healthy ecosystems, create conditions conducive to life? And that while everyone talks about climate, the media and everyone else assumes that that means carbon, which of course regenerative agriculture contributes to. But for most people, most humans and most animals, it's warming and storming and fires and floods and droughts, which are the real consequences of climate change. And those are actually consequences of landscape degradation. Regenerative agriculture is our only real hope for literally cooling the planet back down and reversing climate change. I haven't heard that as part of your story, and I'm wondering why. Because carbon tunnel vision may kill us, and you have the solution. So where is that in your storytelling?
So no pressure, who'd like to?
Well, in some ways, that's exactly what I was speaking to about this spectrum of definitions and recognizing that the dominant majority is talking about regeneration as optimizing for carbon. We go a little further out, then we're talking more about soil health, a little further out, biodiversity, water quality. Then further out, we're getting to the sociocultural dimensions. And I think it's about the marketing, it's the storytelling, and frankly, it's the consensus building, which is no small task, because I think if we, shake out all the companies, there is a reason. It's just easier. You're avoiding a lot of very complicated issues if you make this more about carbon, as if that were simple, right? So I think, yes, it's storytelling, but it's a lot of trust building and consensus building. Then we need to structure a global narrative that really tells the story. You just talked about life for animals, plants, that's where you started as well. It's what we heard from Yoke. So the story is there. I think we're all speaking that there are multiple dimensions, but there isn't consensus yet to tell that more cogently.
So I want to get the most questions, so Nick. He's the tallest, and so I saw his hand first.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So I'm glad that somebody brought up the word fish, because the planet, in fact, is at least 2/3 ocean. And there is a lot of fish farming, which I'm involved with, organic fish farming, that I think could be integrated with Hugh's doing what you were doing. And I'm wondering whether anybody on the panel would like to talk about their interest in organic fish farming. And just as an aside, I'm giving a speech talk. I've been on the board of Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute for 37 years now. And so I've been very involved in the oceans and various activities going. And we are growing at Hui Watering or Cove Finishing a lot of organic fish farming. And I think it fits perfectly with what Hugh and his colleagues are doing. And I just thought somebody might like to talk about it.
I'm wondering if I could tell Luke to answer that.
A comment on that. Yeah, thank you for the question. Well, most of my work's been in the terrestrial realm, so I'm no expert. So a term that we use is a keystone crop, and those of you who are ecologists will understand the significance that means a crop that you can build a whole agro-ecosystem around. Some of these rubber farmers we're working with in Thailand, they have 100 different crops in their plots, small plots, a hectare, 2 hectares. In the oceanic or coastal context, I think kelp is maybe one of the most exciting opportunities because you can grow a whole ecosystem around kelp. And there's the work that Brent Smith and Blue Wave are doing off the coast of the east coast of the US here. For those of you that don't know, they're practicing something called integrated multi-trophic aquaculture. So that means they're growing kelp, but they're growing kelp in a way that integrates a variety of other shellfish, mussels, scallops, and so on. There have been some wonderful experiments of how you can do that in combination with growing, with raising fish, whether it's salmon or otherwise. So I think that's it's an untapped, huge opportunity, and maybe one of the best examples of a keystone crop for the oceans. So we're in sort of the early stages of sort of branching out into more sort of oceanic context. But I'd love to have a conversation with you afterwards because I see it as we talk about nodal opportunities. The idea being like acupuncture, where you make an intervention and it has a larger sort of systemic health outcome. And I think kelp is one of those. Because as you know, the pen fish industry is hugely harmful to ecosystems and much work to be done.
If I could get one of the Columbia students to ask a question. Please.
Hi everyone, Gloria Blaze. Sorry I lied. I am actually a Cornell student.
No shade on Columbia.
So I know a couple things that you mentioned here, some of the partners, and I know Timothy and you. My question is, I'm born in Haiti and I'm currently looking research in Haiti, and I find that trying to find partners or trying to pitch a proposal in a place that people assume is, don't go there, you can't do any work there. I want to know what the experience has been like for anyone that can relate to this on the panel. How has it been trying to, I guess, work with, on the person trying to get the partnership or the funding, how has it been trying to pitch what you're trying to do and actually receiving the approval for a partnership? And on the funding end or the end of the more resource partner, how has it been working or trying to at least be the leader in working in these places that others are actually avoiding? I hope that makes sense, but I'm just really curious in how it is trying to work in areas that people assume are not conducive to actually reaching your goals or objectives. Thank you, and sorry again.
Wait, I'm gonna answer one part of that and then ask Sarah to respond. And speaking to the partnership that we've had with Tim, you need to build a trust so that you are intricately linked with what the company's goals and needs are, and you're able to tailor your response to where they're going. They're able to make other adjustments to where they're going based on the feedback, so that there's never a point at which you suddenly realize you're out of sync. So it's a long-term commitment, but the results are so much better than a kind of a less integrated approach, I would say. But I'll let Sarah respond on the donor side.
It's good advice. That's good insight. And actually, I was a grantee of Rockefeller leading a small grassroots NGO for many years, more years actually than being on Rockefeller. So I come with a lot of empathy to that question, because it does take a tremendous transaction cost to finally eke a grant out of philanthropy, and it's harder than it should. The trust building is slower than it should be, and there's far more risk aversion than there should be, especially for a sector that's supposed to be shouldering the risk to enable these gains. So it's massive, massive reform, and your question's important. I think what I can say for Rockefeller, to Hugh's point, we are a very sort of activist foundation in that we spend a lot of time, too much time? A lot of time, devising strategy. So we have thought a lot about this good food strategy. So when we're talking to partners, we're always thinking about how does this partner's vision enable us to meet the outcomes that we are trying, and we've worked with a large constituency to define. With our regen portfolio, it's still really new and it's still emerging, and we are really positioning ourselves in a learning mode and a connection mode. So it's a great time to come and build relationships, and I'd love to talk and learn more. But I'm not going to sugarcoat that it is a slower process than it should be.
Can I just offer one thing on that we have been investing in the Smallholder Farmers Alliance since 2010. But it initially came from a personal connection and experience that our CEO had in Haiti. And so that's what got the ball rolling. And then the partnership obviously has evolved from there. But
the pitch was, you've got a factory next door in the Dominican Republic where they do not need trees, excuse me. We are next door in Haiti, we need the trees. Would you consider sponsoring us? And your logo is a tree. And he said yes. It's a much longer story. One more question. There in the fellow beard, where in the yellow shirt.
Hey there, Nick Schwanz. Nice to meet you guys. This was primarily a supply side conversation, I think. I think we tiptoed a little bit into the demand side piece, but to put this much pressure on farmers to be doing all this work doesn't necessarily seem fair. And I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are on creating appropriate incentives and disincentives for actually making this catch on in the marketplace. Because the way you guys described all this, it doesn't really show how these products compete with people. And I think it's generally understood that there's a very small amount of people that actually vote with their dollar in a way that's like heart driven. Primarily, it needs to be based on a value proposition that's very close to their personal lives. So thinking about food, it's very intangible to see what sort of the benefits are of regenerative agriculture. Thinking about shoes, beyond labeling it regenerative, there is no benefit to the consumer. So how do you think we start to actually build in the appropriate incentives and disincentives to make this a consumer choice that benefits them, not just one that's an altruistic choice?
Can I ask Lois?
I'll take a crack. So I think this issue of like it's like dietary shift as well, but also obviously what people are wearing, but is something we've been also doing quite a bit of thinking about at Marine Institute and working on a number of studies and talking to a lot of different partners about. And it's, again, I feel like the global food system has really, again, as I said before, like been geared towards, cheap, plentiful food. And so much of our, land has been given over to just producing a few key staple crops. So I think partly it's just going back to like for each country or region and others and really kind of almost like going, thinking about what is locally appropriate as well. Like it's often going back and making sure that the research, the research and innovation and development is also just not focused on these, monocrops and wheat and rice and others, but actually what is like a locally produced local crop that's been eaten for centuries in there, what sorts of tasty products that really appeal to consumers now, that connects with their kind of culture and history. So I think that's where a lot of excitement is happening and a lot of innovation is happening. So trying to kind of ensure that there's been, in so many countries, there's this shift towards sort of, say, Western diets, sort of high meat consumption, processed food, and others. And so, but actually in, many, many other countries, there is a sort of a deeper relationship between what's produced in the land and what people actually still do want to eat. So I think that's one issue. So really understanding how do we spur that innovation, the role of SMEs and others in producing really tasty, delicious food that's based on local cultures, local preferences, rather than just seeing this, and I think I really felt this last week. It was the African Green Revolution Forum in Kigali, and they're like really wanting to celebrate like what is indigenous, like local food for their countries. And not be so dependent on imports. It's just wrong that so many African countries are dependent on imported food. So that's one issue. And I think the other one is really getting to this issue of like, why is it that this sort of regeneratively produced food and textiles and others is so much more expensive? So we have to fix the market failure here. And it's like true cost of food accounting and other ways that I know that businesses are looking at addressing that. There's also on the public finance side. So there's, huge sums, like 600 billion per annum, I think, of agricultural subsidies, and only a fraction of that is going towards, environmentally sustainable production. So that's a huge opportunity again to kind of shift towards the positive incentives that bring down the costs, that make this food, because I know a lot of consumers will go back based on price point. They'll go based on price point, based on taste and what they want to eat. But so looking at all those factors, how do we bring down the cost of regeneratively produced food? How do we create more food that's regenerative, that's tasty and appeals to consumers? I think these are all things to consider.
As a follow-up to your question, in Haiti, we did not start with the farmers as a commercial relationship. It was like a way to build local capacity. And your curiosity is the farmers one. They used to say, okay, you're asking me to practice this type of agriculture, but what will be the outcome of that? What price will we receive per pound for the cotton? And I started explaining them that doing regenerative cotton will add more values to their farms because at different seasons we'll be able to harvest different crops because we're not doing monoculture. For example, cotton can be intercropped with peanuts, sorghum, beans, and we use to do biological control. That means planting okra around cotton farms. So all these are benefits they can receive through regenerative cotton. And at the end, they have a level of premium price for the cotton, while the land is a very living soil, and not for 5 years, but for life. It's worth doing the effort.
Last word to you, Sarah.
Yeah, I was just gonna add one more offering to the question of like, what is that package of incentives and disincentives, and how do we make sure we're not putting this all on consumers while we're waiting to build the case? I think there's a really interesting opportunity to look at public procurement. So if we think about public procurement, take school meals as an example, right? You have public dollars, driven towards foods produced in certain ways. We tend in the United States, for example, to optimize for price first. What is the cheapest apple? If the cheapest apple is conventionally grown in China, if it is 1 cent cheaper than Washington State or New York State grown apples, the Chinese apples win. You can change procurement standards. We can change toward good food purchasing that looks at what is the production regime? Is the food nourishing? How were workers treated? Was there fair labor? We have a really exciting grantee in the United States called the Center for Good Food Purchasing that's working with 17 states and the largest municipal school districts in the world to help optimize against a suite of environmental, social, health, and other metrics. And we're now looking to take that paradigm and that idea to global level through a partnership with the World Food Program. So I think it's a really promising avenue to start to change the conversation with government, think about sending a signal to private sector, but vis-a-vis public dollars.
So as you can tell, regenerative agriculture is a work in progress. There are no easy definitions, no easy path forward. But what is interesting is that there is a growing sense of the emergence of a diverse community of people who are involved in shaping it. And that so many of the ideas that are floating around are able to be cross-pollinated between these different sectors. It's not often that you get smallholders on the same platform as corporations, foundations. We're hopeful that this is a conversation that can continue. And so we're grateful to the Rockefeller Foundation and Columbia University for being co-presenters today. And I just also wanted to give a shout out to TerraGenesis. These are our sponsors, TerraGenesis, the data economics company, and Inauro. And if you pick up the little card for Inauro on the way out, you can scan the QR code and I believe get a discount on their fabulous chocolate. So I just want to leave you with this. There are currently 500 million smallholder farms throughout the developing world. They are not the only focus of regenerative agriculture, but that is where the real action is taking place. On those farms live 2.5 billion people. They live and work on those farms. That is 1/3 of humanity. They have, for generations, been marginalized and ignored, given no support. Suddenly, they are at the cutting edge of this emerging revolution. We don't know where it's going to go. But for the first time, there's a possibility of enlisting that huge swath of humanity in working towards better food sovereignty rather than simply food security, working towards climate change. So we're happy to be a small part of that revolution. Thank you. Now we'd like to have a quick cup of coffee or tea because we have to be out of the building no later than 12:15.
Thank you.